It was 40 years ago that the Unitarian Universalist Association required all students studying for the Unitarian ministry to successfully pass a clinical experience as a chaplain in either a hospital or prison setting. So in the summer, just following Roe v. Wade, I loaded up my VW in Boston with all my worldly possessions and headed down to Washington for 10 weeks of supervision as a hospital chaplain. It was the largest teaching hospital in the country, with 30 chaplains to serve its population of 4,000 patients. Driving through Connecticut, which I always considered no man's land between Boston and New York, kind of put there deliberately to make the trip intolerably long. Driving through Connecticut, my VW engine froze. The car was done. The hitchhiker I had picked up on the way cursed me. The VW dealership in a nearby town gave me $75 for the tires, they said, and I had to figure out the rest of my trip. It was truly a Zen moment when I had to decide which of my possessions to carry with me and which to surrender in order to lighten my load. I proved myself to be a failure at Zen practice as I proceeded to carry far too many of my possessions up the ramp leading to Highway 95, ready to stick out my thumb on a hot June day. While still walking up the ramp, an enormous limousine pulls up beside me. The window on the passenger's side rolls down. A black chauffeur in uniform smiles at me and asks, "Do you need a ride?" I threw my stuff in the back, sat beside the chauffeur as he requested, and discovered that he worked for Angela Lansbury. We had great conversation, and he drove me right to the Port Authority terminal in New York on 42nd Street. And when I, as a scruffy 20-something, got out of the limousine, I received a few inquiring glances by passers-by. It was like I was supposed to be famous, but they couldn't quite place me where they were. I took the bus to D.C. and walked into the Episcopalian Hospital as the only Unitarian in a sea of chaplains. We had some classes before being let loose on the patients. I resisted the education. They taught that ministers had a bag of resources readily available. It included scripture, prayer, and the authority of ministry because we were God's representatives on earth. I sensed I was in deep trouble. In fact, the only question in my mind was whether I should take the train or the bus back to Boston. I didn't think I was going back in a limo. I informed my supervisor, a black Methodist minister, Reverend Frazier, that as a Unitarian, I guess I just didn't have the right tools in my toolbox to serve a Christian hospital. Well, he decided right then and there to make me his project. "Oh, I see," he said. "Unitarians don't experience much suffering. Unitarians don't know the grief of losing a loved one. Let me see if I got this right now. Unitarians manage to stay out of harm's way and do not encounter unexpected tragedies that can tear them apart emotionally. After a long pause, as I stood there in silence, he said, well, maybe I should become a Unitarian so I can be spared life's sorrows. Reverend Fraser, like all people on this planet, Unitarians are not exempt from the ravages of suffering. Well then, what are you going to provide for the grieving family in an ICU, where the family is gathered there waiting for the inevitable death of a mother or a husband or a child? Are you going to walk into that intensive care unit and talk to them about Roe v. Wade? Or are you going to strike up a conversation about Watergate? What are you going to take with you into that room? You're going to bring a college textbook in physics and read to them about the laws of the physical universe? I don't know. You, Mr. Goldsmith, are going to bring them the power of prayer. I doubt that would work, sir. I'm not talking about magic, like asking God to swoop down and save the day. You liberals don't understand prayer. It's not about asking God to do your beckoning. It's about you finding your own ability to feel and relate to the pain of others, their suffering, and digging real deep into your own soul to provide comfort, to provide this certain comfort that transcends rational discourse. Now, do you think you've got some work to do here? Yes, sir. I believe I do. At the end of 10 weeks, when we had a little modest ceremony marking the completion of the training, Reverend Fraser whispered in my ear, I didn't think you were going to make it. Neither did I. Thank you. So I've been thinking for a long time about how Unitarians, humanists, liberals, progressives, atheists, secularists, free thinkers deal with people when tragedy strikes. You know, in that New York Times article I shared with you this morning about the conspicuous absence of humanists in Newtown, Connecticut following the devastating massacre, a humanist psychologist was quoted as saying, "The best we can do as humanists is to talk about the pain in rational terms with the people who are suffering." Apparently, as virtually the full religious spectrum participated in the memorial services and other rites, nobody felt the need to include rational discourse. And yet, 20% of Americans have opted out of any religious identification and prefer the label none. Well, surely, if 1 out of every 5 Americans has severed ties with formal religious practices, you would expect a fair representation of rational types to be present in Newtown. Yet there was no Unitarian or humanist or atheist present to offer consoling words. Susan Jacoby, a well-respected atheist writer and speaker, followed up on this question dominating the national conversation about rational religion's failure to provide succor to those in need. Jacoby makes the same mistake as all non-believers when she writes, and I quote, Atheists cannot find solace in the idea that dead children are now angels in heaven. One, that's a cop-out. It's too easy, it's far too easy to confine religion to this infantile level of mythology and to pretend this sophistication for oneself that one has moved beyond such puerile fantasies. In fact, very, very few believers buy into this scenario about angels and have instead developed a far more mature faith. 2, she avoids talking about what her beliefs are, opting instead to discuss her denial of God images, images that most people have dispensed with after the age of 6. 3, she writes that atheists are not bloodless intellectual robots. I agree. But a negation of belief is ill-suited to console family and friends in the aftermath of an unthinkable tragedy. One needs to be able to share one's own faith that can carry you through the storm. What are the resources you draw upon in crises that just might, on some basic gut level, serve to inspire someone who is grieving a tremendous loss? Now, aside from the shootings at Sandy Hook Elementary School, the question generally of liberals responding in an effective manner when crises occur has been a disturbing subject for a long time. 23 years ago, Bill Murray, who served as president of Meadville Lombard, our Unitarian Universalist seminary in Chicago, he wrote a book called A Faith for All Seasons, Liberal Religion and the Crises of Life. I picked it up hot off the presses. I met Bill Murray. I like Bill Murray. In fact, I really like him very, very much. I would never ask him to speak at a family memorial service. It's not the place to hear him say, I'm taking some stuff out of the books, recurrent themes, but these are exact quotes. 1, we do not expect a supernatural power to comfort us. 2, we do not believe in personal immortality. 3, and because of our insistence on individual freedom of belief, no one can articulate the you answers to the crises of life.